Hello geeks and ghouls, we're once more into this video about Deadhouse Gates by Steven Erikson. I'm doing my reread of Malazan Book of the Fallen. I've read the book and I'm just going through my notes and talking about it part by part or book by book as it is used as book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4. Today we talk about book 3. And two things. One, if you have heard that this book has epic battles, book 3 is definitely what you want to read in this one because, oh boy, there are some epic battles here. And also, for some weird reason, well, I preface every of those videos as in I spoil the next books. I'm going through my script right now and I don't believe I am spoiling anything in this video. So you can actually kind of watch it even if you have not finished the entire series but just this book, and that's another one because the rest of the video in the series are definitely spoiling things that will come later. So let's go to chapter 11, and the chapter starts with Felicin and her companions. They're on the undead ship Silandra and they're trapped in the warren of Kurald Emurlan, which is the elder warren of Shadow. And yeah, we'll talk about this and Erikson's world building talking about book 4 because it ties to something that has been going along for quite some time throughout the book, but if you read this book you know that, so I don't spoil later books. But it's kind of interesting how there are little trinkets here and there that lead to a big revelation later on, and that's something that's a recurrent theme throughout the series, and reading it I'm actually getting small pieces that I may have missed on the reread, so that's quite interesting. So the Tlanimas have left, and Culp, who is also a user of the Warren of Meneas, aka the Shadow, the youngest Shadow Warren, is looking for a way to escape it. And yeah, then a huge undead dragon flies in because yes, this Warren is apparently a place where people just pop in. And yeah, all hell breaks loose. The dragon sets the ship aflame as it opens another warren, and Baldin catches Felicin and they throw them outside of the ship and they fall and they land in the desert. As they wander, they've also found that Heboric and Culp has also fallen nearby, and they walk through the desert. Baldin reveals to Felicin that he used to be a Talon. The Talons were Dancer's version of the claw that he developed as a sort of a countermeasure to Surly's, aka Lassine's, claws. But after Dancer was assassinated or ascended, Lassine killed them all but few of them, and Tavor knew of Bodin, so she employed him to protect and to extract her sister Felicin from the mines. See, this is her plan. Tavora just became the adjunct to the Empress and she wants to prove her loyalty. So she adds Felicin in the call just to prove that she's faithful. She's willing to throw her own sister to the mines, so she's devoted to the Empire. And at the same time, she hires an elite assassin to go in, protect her, and rescue her. And if Felicin was not sleeping with Benneth and anybody he was giving her to, they might have escaped much earlier. So yeah, the best laid plans always go awry. But Felicin is pissed, and you know what, rightfully so. So she explodes and drives him away, and he lives. Hiborg and Culp are quite pissed, but yes, as they get as they stumble upon the whirlwind and are engulfed by it, they realize, oh shit, we're in Raraku, and we have to find somewhere to hide. So they find some caves and they hide in there. Meanwhile, Fiddler and company are in Post-Temple. There is a great scene where Fiddler bonds with Mapo. Again, Steven Erikson does know how to do bromance. Romance, not so much, but bromance, he's the king of bromance, right? These books are full of bromances, and they find out that Past plans to use Upsilon to become the new Saik, so that Sadu has control of the rebellion, and that's another way for Sadu to mess up with the Malazan Empire. But they're not that happy, right? They also realize that Skrull Past has a servant who is this sailor guy with one misshapen arm that is prowling around the temple all this time, and suddenly all the little hints come to their minds and they realize, oh shit, this is Upsilon's father. So yeah, they realize that, but then Pust sends the servant away and Upsilon goes out to follow him. So the rest of the party, Fiddler, Crocus, Icarium and Mappa, have to go out and rescue her. Speaking of bridge burners, Callum finds out that his way to Aren is blocked by Corbolodom's army. He is scouting ahead of the other survivors, the family he is helping get to Aren, along with Apt, and there's a great bond between Callum and Apt. They sort of become friends, or as Mike from Mike Book Reviews noted, there is a doggo thing. It's like Apt is a pet to Callum. It was a fun comparison. So they scout ahead and they discover that Corbolodom's army is there blocking their path. Also, Callum is very, very pissed. He's appalled because he sees 1,300 children crossed. There's a wall of Ixek crosses and children are there, and he's very pissed at it. So he tells that to Apt. In case you don't know who Apt is the demon, the Aptorian demon that Psyche gave to Callum at the end of book 1, and here Callum calls her Apt instead of Aptorian. So Callum is desperate, and he has this stone that Quick Ben gave him that will help him get to Lacine. So he throws the stone, it breaks, and creates an entrance to the Imperial Warren, so they get there, but Apt stays behind, because she is taking the children from the crosses in the dead of night, and she takes them to Shadow Throne, and he is convinced that by her that yes, he can create an army out of the children, because Malazan. Because grim stuff happens in this book all the time, but it's not grimdark according to the author. Alright, she only takes one boy who had his eyes gouged out, and Shadow Throne gave him one eye as a companion, and they continue on following Callum. Meanwhile, Staragil, who is following Callum, also stumbles upon the opening of the Warren, and there she meets a claw called Pearl, and they continue following Callum in. So, chapter 12. And we have seen no Coltrane, no Duiker in the previous chapter, so here we're having a treat of ourselves. Because we're days into the march of Coltrane, I think not days, weeks actually, and there is a new nameless leader of an army of the apocalypse following them and constantly harassing them. And the situation is very grim. Steven Erikson he paints a very vivid picture of the suffering, as food and waters are running low and they're in the desert, so they're slaughtering animals and they're drinking their blood as a way to survive, and people are dying. And there is a scene where a baby dies when a child dies in his mother's lap, And there's a great line here. It is said by Lol to Duiker. Lol is a captain of the Marines and a friend to Duiker, because as with military fantasy, and I think that this book has a lot of military fantasy too, friendship and loyalty are very important themes, and that's something Erikson does quite well in the series, the friendship and the loyalty between the band of brothers and sisters. So Lal says, children are dying. That's a succinct summary of humankind, I'd say. Who needs tomes and volumes of history? Children are dying. The injustices of the world hide in those 3 words. And you know what? Alright, this sort of proclamation, but back when I was reading Malazan for the first time, I was also reading other fantasy books like Discworld, and I just assumed that this writing style is very common in fantasy. In retrospect, having read more fantasy since then, Malazan is kind of the grim and serious version of Discworld, because he gets very philosophical. There are these very elliptical chapters of person coming in and talking through their perspective and then leaving again, or saying something cryptic as a hook. There is always a climax towards the end, and also there is this great character-based humor. So yes, Pratchett and Erikson, they're not the most obvious comparison, but once you notice it, you cannot unsee it, because they're very similar in a way. There's a huge structured world with the soft magic that is very impressive, with very heavy philosophical themes, with many characters and many stories that are strung together, and well, they're sort of standalone in a way. Each of the books of Malazan is a story with a beginning, a middle, and an ending that leaves a cliffhanger to another story, and Discord sort of does that, but yeah, it's not the same, really. If you like Discord, I won't say go read Malazan, because they're completely different in tone and scope, but when you start to notice that, yes, it's a darker reflection, a more serious and darker reflection of Discord in a way. Of course, there is an established history in Malazan that Discord doesn't have, which is quite a difference, because they're different genres, alright? But you just notice it, okay? And there is a reason why I love both series, because of these things. Duiker learns that he has to escort some marines, 2 warlocks, which are children, and some sappers in a covert operation to assassinate the new leader. So they use Earth Spirit, they dig a tunnel underneath the camp of the army, and they find out that the leader of the warband is a man possessed by the same god that they thought destroyed in chapter 10 in the end. A fragment of it survived and is trapped inside a man, same tribesman, who has been sunsat so it won't escape. And they get losses. One of the warlocks dies, the other goes catatonic. Neil is that warlock, one of the children that destroyed the elder god, and he's carried by a female marine that catches Duiker's eye, but he feels too old for her, so he doesn't want to pursue a relationship, and they're fighting together. Duiker was a soldier before the Emperor made him a historian. He sent him to study history and then to write the story of the Malazan conquerings. So yeah, that's the one great love story in Malazan Book of the Fall, in my opinion. Duiker and his nameless marine. Maybe there's another one later on, I cannot remember at the moment, but this is the one great love story in this book, which is kind of painful, come to think of it. But then again, not all is lost in this operation, because Duiker notices that the tunnel they dug in was damp. It was seeping water, so the spirits dig a hole, and that allows the 7th Army to resupply with water. So they get a new lease on life. Meanwhile, Felicin and her friends, they find refuge in some strange cavern that leads to a buried city, that is full of lifelike statues, and Heboric, who has his eyes shut by the sandstorm, reveals to them that yes, he's actually using his new hand because they give him strength and all this kind of stuff. They're mysterious and do a lot of things that they shouldn't do, and his eyes too, so Duker is transforming into something we don't know yet. They say Duker, I meant Heboric. He reveals to them that the statues were once humans that petrified because the elders of the city tried to open the Soul-Taken Warren as a way to make them an alternative to Ascendants, because being a Soul-Taken was an alternative to becoming an Ascendant of sorts, and everybody got petrified. And then Tlanimas came along because they're like, the Tlanimas are like the US. The Tlanimas in Malazan world are like the US. They will just come in and bomb everything if they think that something is wrong. They're policing the world. And yes, there is this detours into world building while reading the stories, which can be a little frustrating, come to think of it, because you want to see what happens next, but you get a 50-page interlude of people walking around and talking about this in history. But it also enriches the world a lot, because there are no info dumps by the narrator, who have the characters to info dump for us, right? And to each other, because they're not aware of the history of it. And this city is straight out of a Dark Souls game, to the point that I wonder, did the creators of Dark Souls ever read Malazan Book of the Fallen? Because I cannot unsee it. I mean, Knight of Knives by E.N.C. Esselmond is definitely Bloodborne-like, and here we have these cities and all those undead that remind me of Dark Souls all of the time, to the point where I was reading the chapters and I was just the point was like doing this thing, because I felt like they were walking through a level in Dark Souls. Oh yeah, meanwhile we have Callum and the refugees moving in throughout the Imperial War, and we have some infighting there. He learns that Minala was having an abusive husband and an unhappy marriage. Of course, there's infighting because tensions, and this is Malazan, and that's constant in this book, and not only that, as well as the romance is developing. It's not a bad romance too. Really, for some reason, the bloodiest book with the big campaign, and what's coming next is the one with the good romances. Go figure. Meanwhile, Pearl and Stara, who are following Callum all this time, they jump outside the Warren because Pearl has to assassinate the possessed leader of the warband. They take a huge beating while they're trying to do that, but then Apt pops in and just rips the guy apart. Yeah. It's, Apt is this lousy guy in a multiplayer game. When they pop in, they take the kill, and they go away. What can I say? Chapter 13. We're again in Coltrane's army. There is more tension here because the nobles become more and more agitated. They are like, they feel they're disrespected. They have some crazy expectations that will be looked upon and taken care of, and this creates tension with the soldiers. Duker, who was a soldier, almost beats one of the nobles, but the army reaches a river and they have to cross it, and there is this enemy warlord called Camis Rilo, who is waiting at the other side of the river. There is a hard battle coming. But two of the warlocks, Neil and Nether, they bring in a horse and they use it in a ritual that makes the rest of the cavalry untiring. So there's some heavy cavalry doing a charge against all odds that shouldn't be possible to do, actually. But since the horses are untiring, they just smash into the army, and then the sappers of the 7th come in and they throw their munitions, they create havoc. I just love the sappers of the 7th because of their ingenuity, because of their lack of discipline, and also because they save the day. They're not bridge burners, but just seeing them makes you feel how great the sappers are in the Malazan army, and the way their leader is evading staff briefings and all this kind of stuff are just hilarious, and they come along later. And the horse that Nilanether used, it dies, because that's a grim reminder that magic in Malazan is brutal and unforgiving, and there's a price to magic, which is great. It's actually quite far from the D&D influences of Malazan, and there are some things like the darkness and the price of magic, or the lack of a concrete ethical system that sets Malazan apart from D&D. The losses of the battle are staggering. Duiker is shocked by the destruction. Even though there was a victory, it was a victory that was paid in blood, and a lot of blood. And as he was fighting, the female marines tells him, "Old man, I'm going to jam your bones tonight," and she does. And yes, this might be the best romance in the series, because you know what, it feels very natural. Alright, it's, I mean, we have the old man who finds a younger, attractive woman and catches her eye, and she takes him to bed. But then again, we have soldiers that are horny after being in battle, so yes, it makes perfect sense. And odds are they're dying. Spoiler, they are dying. You've read the book, you know that they are dying, which makes the love story tragic too. Meanwhile, Callum is and the family, they reach Aren, they leave the warren, they find themselves in a cemetery. They go to a tavern nearby. There, an unknown man offers Callum passage to Unta on a ship called the Ragstopper, which also happens to be carrying the Aren treasury, and it's arranged by a man who wants Callum to get to Unta and assassinate the Empress. His name is Salk Elan. Minala is pissed that Callum is leaving them and goes on to follow him. Because love, right? Meanwhile, Lustara Gil also reaches Aren and she's arrested, as most of the Red Blades are, and this is kind of suspicious. Maybe it's a sign of things to come towards the ending, of course it is. But enough Callum, let's go to Chapter 14, which is very focused on the Araku front, because here we have Felicin and her two boys that realize that we're bearing in a city of the First Empire, which has a long history of what's happening with the First Empire. I won't go in. And this place is crawling with soul-taken diverse, so they escape and they stumble upon a friendly traveler who is smitten by Felicin and wants to take her and heal her of her scars. And then they're attacked by a soul-taken bear, so their benefactor turns into an army of rats because he's diverse. He kills Culp. The rats jump on him and devour him, but Bodin storms in and he saves Felicin and Heboric. They escape. Bodin finds them later on, but he's badly wounded, so he dies in Felicin's arms. And this is sort of a cathartic moment for Felicin, because she gets through her pain, her addiction, everything that happened to her, and she's ready to be reborn. And just by chance, they happen upon Leoman and the Toblakai, who you know who he is if you read the later books, but I won't spoil. So yes, that was book 3 of Malazan Book of the Fallen. No spoilers for the next books apart from a minor one, but I didn't say what exactly. And yeah, next video will be about book 4. It'll probably contain spoilers for the rest of the series. Hope you enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching.